He used to cry when he scraped his knees, and I was the only one who could make him laugh again. I stayed up through fevers, night terrors, and teenage heartbreaks. I gave him my last slice of cake more times than I can count, and once I sold my wedding ring just to cover his first semester's tuition. So when I saw my name listed as deceased on his wedding website, I didn't scream. I didn't call. I just sat there, breathing slow like a ghost might, because I realized in that moment I wasn't part of his story anymore. But this isn't a loud revenge story. This is what happens when a mother stops begging to be seen and quietly returns to her feet. There's a photo in my kitchen drawer of Brian when he was 6, front teeth missing, one sock halfway down, holding a balloon that says, "I'm 6, like the world needed a reminder. I remember the way he held that balloon so tight his knuckles turned white. That boy loved so big. That boy used to run down the driveway just to hug me when I got home from the grocery store. That boy used to cry if I missed one of his class presentations. But life, or time, or ambition, or maybe just the slow corrosion of appreciation, turned him into a man who no longer mentions my name. I'm Marianne Colwood. I'm 71 years old. I taught high school literature for over 3 decades, raised one son, buried one husband, and until recently, I thought I still mattered. Not in a grand way, just in the kind of way where someone remembers that you made lasagna on their birthday because it was their favorite, or that you saved every one of their report cards, even the bad ones. I didn't need applause. I just thought he'd remember. Brian was born during a heat wave in July. His father was in the Navy, gone for most of the first year. I did it alone. Diapers, night feedings, pediatric appointments. There was a time when I memorized the sound of his breathing through 2 closed doors. He had asthma, bad enough to keep me awake most nights with a baby monitor in one hand and an inhaler in the other. We didn't have much money back then, but we had a routine. I clipped coupons like it was an Olympic sport, packed his lunch every morning, and never missed a parent-teacher conference, even the ones where he got in trouble for talking too much. When Richard, my husband, passed away 14 years ago, it was like a switch flipped. Brian was 19 in college and grieving in his own quiet, unreachable way. He stopped calling, said he was busy. I understood. I gave him space. That's what they tell mothers to do. Let them grow up. Let them find themselves. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes when they find themselves, they lose you along the way. After Richard died, I sold the second car and cut cable. I still had the house, but I started tutoring kids on the side just to keep up with bills. Then, Brian called one day asking if I could help him invest in a starter property. Said he wanted to flip it, maybe live in it for a while with someone serious. He sounded hopeful, excited even. Said, "It's the one thing I really need to get going." I dipped into what was left of my retirement account and paid the down payment. The house was in Cedar Springs, a lovely 2-story with old stonework and a garden out back that reminded me of the cottage in Sense and Sensibility. I kept my name on 51% of the title. Brian insisted I didn't have to, but I told him, "It's for both of us. Someday you'll understand." I thought maybe that house would host holidays, birthdays, grandbabies. I imagined myself sitting on the porch one day, watching his life unfold in the yard I helped pay for. When he got laid off in 2020, I sent money, quietly. No lectures, no guilt, just a check in the mail and a note. "We all fall down, I've got your back." He never thanked me. That stung, but I let it go. You tell yourself these things are phases, that kids grow out of forgetting you. He never invited me to the housewarming. That was the first clue. Then came the skipped holidays. Thanksgiving too far, Christmas maybe next year, my birthday, lost in emails. He called less, then not at all. Still, I held on to hope. I told myself, maybe he's just overwhelmed. I stitched his baby quilt back together last year when the threads started pulling loose. I don't know why. He never asked for it. But I thought, maybe one day. When I heard he was engaged, I found out the way a stranger might, through a tagged Instagram post from a mutual friend of his fiancée. A photo of her hand, the ring, and him smiling like he'd just won the lottery. My name wasn't mentioned. My comment was never liked. That night, I opened the drawer with all the birthday cards he never sent back. There's a stack of letters I wrote and never mailed, telling him I loved him, telling him I was proud. I don't know what I was waiting for. A sign, an apology? But nothing came. What did come was a message from an old neighbor who stumbled on the couple's wedding site. "Hey, Marianne, did you pass away? Your name's on their in memoriam page." I thought it was a mistake, until I saw it myself. There it was under a photo of the venue. My house, still co-owned by me. A seat will be left in loving memory of the groom's mother, Marianne Colwood. No one called me. No one asked for permission. No one even thought to tell me I was dead. And that, my friend, is where this story begins. Not in grief, not in rage, but in recognition. Because I'm not going to be mourned by people who couldn't even bother to remember I'm still alive. I refreshed the screen 3 times before I could let the words sink in. Mother of the groom, deceased. It wasn't just a glitch. It was bold under the Meet the Family section, just below the image of Brian and Maggie in a canoe, laughing like they'd never known loss. I stared at the sentence for so long my coffee went cold. Then I scrolled down and saw something that made my breath catch. A seat will be left at the front row of the ceremony in memory of the groom's mother, Marianne Colwood. She will be missed. A white lily, a candle. Probably a framed photo of me smiling like someone worthy of being grieved, just not invited. I wanted to laugh. I really did. It was almost poetic. I hadn't been dead yesterday, but now on the internet, on a public wedding website, I was. I closed the laptop slowly like it might explode. My hands were trembling, not from anger, not even from sadness, just hollow. It felt like someone had picked me up, wiped me clean off the family tree, and replaced me with a flower arrangement. Let me ask you something. Have you ever read your own obituary? Have you ever seen your name memorialized in a place where you should be present, not absent? Tell me in the comments if you're brave enough. Have you ever watched your name quietly disappear from someone else's story? I needed air. I stepped out into the backyard, the one I'd trimmed and weeded for 20 years. The hydrangeas were blooming, same as every spring. And suddenly, I hated them for it. I hated how they still bloomed like nothing had changed, like they didn't know I'd just been erased. I thought back to that house, the one Brian and I stood in 5 years ago, the day the realtor handed me the keys. I remember the smell of the floors, fresh pine varnish. I remember Brian standing in the kitchen saying, "Mom, imagine Thanksgiving here, you and me building a family again." I believed him. I signed 51% of the deed over to both of us because I thought I'd always have a place in his world, because I thought my name meant something. Now it was reduced to a chair and a candle. Later that evening, I logged into the county records portal. I had no real plan, just instinct. And when instinct drives a woman who's been ignored too long, it gets things done. Marriage license filed, venue, Cedar Springs, my house, power of attorney document submitted 14 months ago. Wait, what? I clicked. There it was, clear as day. A document granting Brian full legal and medical decision-making power on my behalf, signed and notarized, except I had never signed it. My name looked real. The signature flowed the way mine does, looped M, flat W, but I didn't write it. I hadn't even held a pen that day. And the witnesses? Brian and Maggie. Her name stared back at me like a quiet accusation. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the tile. I wasn't just excluded, I was strategically removed. It wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. And once you see the plan, you can't unsee it. Once you realize you've been written out, not by accident, but on purpose, you stop asking why and start asking what now. That night, I opened the drawer where I keep the good pens and the old checkbooks. I found an envelope and wrote down just the facts. Brian filed public marriage paperwork listing me as deceased. House is legally co-owned, but he applied for mortgage adjustments as sole owner. Power of attorney filed with forged signature. Wedding scheduled on property I still legally possess. Then I wrote one sentence across the back of the envelope in all capital letters. I was erased on paper. I will return in ink. The next morning, I made a pot of coffee and took out the folder labeled Brian's Yes. Inside were documents from the year I claimed that house as a rental, property tax bills with my name, mortgage assistance forms with my address, everything they'd tried to bury. I still had it. It's a strange kind of pain, isn't it? Being made invisible. People think grief is loud, but erasure? Erasure is quiet. It's the dinner table with one chair mysteriously gone. The group photo you're not in, the wedding speech that skips your name, and the worst part? The world just nods along. Like you were never meant to be there in the first place. I called the county clerk's office. The woman on the line sounded half asleep until I said my name. "Oh, you're alive?" "Yes," I said, "and I'm calling to report fraud." I gave her the file number. She put me on hold for 8 minutes. I counted. When she came back, she said something I'll never forget. "This is going to be messy." Messy was fine. Messy meant real. Messy meant someone was finally going to look at the dirt under the rug. I hung up and opened my laptop again. This time, I didn't cry. I opened a blank document and typed the title, Resurrection Plan, because I wasn't going to stay dead just because my son found it convenient. I wasn't going to haunt his life in silence. I was going to walk straight into his ceremony and remind him that I exist. The envelope sat under my laptop for 3 days, untouched. I didn't need to reread what I'd written on the back. I was erased on paper. I will return in ink. It stayed there like a quiet vow, the kind you don't speak out loud because speaking it would make it feel too theatrical. This wasn't a show. It was my life. Or at least, what was left of it. I moved through those days like someone underwater. My hands washed dishes, my feet swept the floor, my mouth answered the neighbors' small talk, but my mind was elsewhere, stuck on a single question. How long had they been planning this? Because that's what it was, wasn't it? A plan, a paper trail made to bury me alive, not out of malice, but out of convenience. I wasn't dramatic, I wasn't difficult, I was just in the way. I pulled the property deed from the old file box in my hall closet. There it was, Marianne Colwood and Brian Colwood, co-owners, clear as day. But next to that deed, I found something else. A payment confirmation. The property tax bill from just last month was paid by me. Not Brian, not Maggie. May flipped it over, my handwriting still fresh. Paid 414, county website glitchy, check number 0921. 14 days after I paid that bill, he submitted the marriage license listing me as deceased. I sat back in my chair, the kind with a frayed cushion I always meant to recover. The kind Brian once called old lady furniture. I remember laughing it off at the time. Now it landed differently. Now I heard it not as a joke, but as foreshadowing. It wasn't just that they had taken my name off the documents. It was that they'd done it so neatly, so quietly, like cleaning out a closet, like sweeping a sidewalk, like I'd become a thing to dispose of. I didn't cry, not then, but I felt something inside me shift. Not rage, not even heartbreak, just emptiness, like someone had been slowly scraping at the edges of me for years, and I hadn't noticed until the center gave way. That night, I found myself in the garage, digging through the plastic storage tubs labeled Brian School. I opened the one with his 5th grade art projects just to remind myself he was real, that we had once shared something, anything. There was a drawing of the two of us, stick figures, one taller, labeled Mom. The little one had a big smile and spiky hair. Me and Mom at the beach, it said in crayon. I traced the words with my fingertip and felt a tight ache in my chest. What do you do with proof that you once mattered? Do you throw it away or do you keep it, knowing the person who made it has thrown you away? A week later, I got a call from the bank. The voice on the line was young, cheerful. She asked to confirm details about the property. I told her I was still a legal owner. There was a pause on her end. "Oh," she said, "it looks like the file lists the sole owner as Mr. Colwood, due to the passing of the joint title holder." My grip on the phone tightened. "That's incorrect. I'm very much alive." Silence. Ma'am, I'll have to escalate this to our legal department. Please do, I said, then hung up. I stared at the phone, still warm in my hand. I had just spoken to a stranger who genuinely believed I was dead. My existence had become a bureaucratic error, a technicality, a checkbox. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, the TV flickering without sound, thinking of all the things that had disappeared before me. The birthday text that never came, the Mother's Day flowers that stopped after year 2, the time he moved across the country and didn't tell me until 3 weeks later, the housewarming party I wasn't invited to, the engagement announcement I learned about through a mutual friend's Facebook post, and now this, the final act, the silent burial. It wasn't just loss, it was unseen loss, the kind you can't explain to people because there's nothing dramatic to point to. No slam door, no nasty voicemail, just absence. Absence that accumulates until you're no longer part of the picture, until you find yourself planning how to prove you're still alive. I opened a new folder on my computer. Not blue, not red, just plain gray. I named it Cedar Springs Legal. Inside, I dropped every file I had, property tax receipts, screenshots of the wedding website, the PDF of the forged power of attorney, my driver's license scan, selfies with a newspaper, a voicemail from the bank. I renamed the file that said photo.jpg to proof still here JPG. And then I closed the laptop, picked up the old wooden spoon I'd had since 1982, and stirred a pot of soup like nothing had changed, because in a way, nothing had. I was still the woman who stayed up with him through asthma attacks, still the woman who gave up retirement for his dreams, still the woman who made banana bread and dropped it off without expecting a thank you. And now, I was still the woman he was trying to bury quietly. But what he didn't know was that I had no interest in haunting. I had no plans to whisper from the shadows. I planned to walk into the room, not as a ghost, but as the truth he tried to forget. The hardest part wasn't realizing I'd been erased. It was realizing I'd allowed it to happen slowly, over time, in pieces too small to notice. A missed call here, an unanswered birthday, a holiday invitation that never came. I kept chalking it up to adulthood, busyness, growing apart. But it wasn't that. It was deliberate. And once I saw that, really saw it, something inside me settled. Not in defeat, in clarity. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at the table anymore. The morning after the call with the bank, I boiled water for tea, even though I wasn't in the mood to drink it. I needed the motion, something for my hands. I watched the steam curl up, soft and stubborn, and thought, that's me now. Not loud, not fast, but rising. That afternoon, I called Nora Delaney. We'd met once, years ago, at a fundraiser for the public library. She was a lawyer back then, still is. Tough one, too. The kind of woman who wears scuffed heels and doesn't care who notices. I remembered her because of something she said at that event. The law has a long memory. You just have to remind it where to look. She answered on the second ring. Nora Delaney speaking. I didn't waste time. It's Marianne Colwood. I need help. I need to be resurrected. There was a pause, then, you want coffee or gin? I cracked the first real smile I'd had in weeks. Both, but let's start with coffee. We met at a small cafe near the courthouse. She wore a corduroy blazer that smelled faintly of cedar. Her hair was pulled back into a no-nonsense ponytail. She didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was. She simply opened a leather folder like it was a sacred text. So, she always said, your son filed for full ownership of the property 6 months ago. She flipped the document and tapped the signature. You see the problem? I leaned in. The signature looked eerily like mine. Slanted, smooth, a flourish on the W. But it wasn't me. That's not my handwriting. Nora didn't blink. I didn't think so. We'll need a handwriting expert, original samples, and an affidavit stating you never signed it. She turned another page. This one's worse. I scanned it. Power of attorney, full medical and legal control, effective 14 months ago. Witnesses, Brian Colwood, Maggie Rowan. My stomach dropped. She signed it? I asked quietly. She did, Nora said. She was there. I thought she might not know. Maybe she... Nora cut me off gently. These things aren't passive, Marianne. People know, or they choose not to know. I didn't respond. I just stared at the paper, then closed my eyes. Behind my eyelids, I saw Brian at 16, standing in our driveway with his college acceptance letter. He had shouted, "I'm finally getting out of here." I had smiled and waved, even as I cried in the car. He never knew. Maybe he never asked. Nora slid another document across the table. "There's more," she said. It was a loan document, a second mortgage, 2 weeks ago, using the house as collateral. My house, the one with the deed I still partially owned. I scanned the bottom. Verified by surviving heir, Brian Colwood. Confirmation letter, Maggie Rowan. My chest went tight. My name wasn't there, not even as a footnote. They've built an entire legal structure on the idea that I'm no longer alive, I whispered. Nora nodded. And it's time to tear it down. We talked for over an hour. She laid out next steps. File for injunction on the property. Submit affidavit of life and co-ownership. Report forged documents to the county clerk. Notify the bank. She didn't sugarcoat it. This is going to get ugly, Bessin, she said. Are you ready for that? I thought about the soup I'd made and frozen, the empty chair by my kitchen table, the box of unsent birthday cards. I thought about the crayon drawing in the garage. I thought about the flower they planned to set on my memorial chair. Yes, I said, I'm ready to stop waiting for an apology that's never coming. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't stew. I got to work. I scanned documents, organized folders, labeled screenshots. I took a selfie holding that day's newspaper, not for Facebook, not for attention, but for the affidavit, proof of life. In a subfolder called Backdoor, I saved every voicemail, every invoice, every email that proved my continued existence. I hid the folder deep in a folder called Taxes, inside one labeled Gardening, inside one named Recipes. Because no one would ever think to look there, and because I was tired of being easy to delete. Before bed, I opened my notebook and wrote, Step 1. Remember who you are, even if no one else does. I stared at the page a while, then added, Step 2. Show up where they thought you couldn't, and I meant it. The morning of the wedding, I woke up without an alarm, just silence, the kind that feels deliberate. I lay in bed for a moment, staring at the ceiling. My body knew something important was coming, even if the world didn't. I sat up slowly, knees cracking the way they always do now, and reached for my notebook. On the top of the page from the night before, I'd written, Walk in, don't flinch, don't justify. I read it 3 times. I didn't need more motivation than that. The night before, I'd packed my things with quiet precision, a navy coat with pinstripe lining, one flash drive labeled Oregano Recipes. Inside were the legal documents, scanned evidence, the affidavit of identity, a small bottle of water, a compact mirror, and a photograph. Brian and me at Wildwood, soaked and smiling on a log ride. I wasn't bringing it to soften him. I brought it to remind myself. I braided my hair back tight, pinned it like armor. Then for the first time in years, I put on lipstick. Not red, not pink, just mauve, steady, unapologetic. By 8:12 a.m., I locked the door behind me. Twice. Not because I was afraid, I locked it like someone who knew she'd return home different. The venue, my house, stood trimmed in pastel ribbons, surrounded by hydrangeas I planted myself 15 years ago. Guests milled about in linen and sunglasses, sipping mimosas. A quartet rehearsed softly behind a hedge. I stood at the edge of the gravel driveway, coat folded over my arm, tote in hand. I didn't shake. I didn't hesitate. They didn't see me at first, but I saw them. I saw Maggie in her bridal robe, hair curled halfway, surrounded by women with clipboards and curling irons. She was laughing. She looked young and light, like she hadn't practiced grief in her mirror yet. I stepped through the archway. 2 guests turned, then another. Someone murmured something, and then Brian came into view. He was halfway down the patio steps, straightening his tie, grinning at a groomsman. When he saw me, the grin froze. Not a drop, not a stumble, just a clean stop, like time skipping a beat. He stepped forward too fast. "Mom, what are you doing here?" I didn't answer him. I didn't need to. Instead, I looked to my right. Nora Delaney appeared beside me, her presence quiet but solid. She wore a slate-colored pantsuit, hair pulled back, sunglasses still on. She didn't smile. She handed me the envelope. Brian's hand hesitated before taking it. He opened it. Notice of dispute. Formal objection. Fraudulent power of attorney, signed affidavit, date stamped. Property freeze, venue invalid without full consent of legal co-owner. His face went pale. Behind him, Maggie emerged from the foyer. The string quartet began their opening piece. Too soft, too romantic, wrong for the moment. She carried her bouquet in both hands, oblivious for just a second until she spotted me. She slowed, her lips parted. I met her eyes. There was no anger in mine, just presence. She walked forward. "You're Marianne," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. "But I thought you—" Her voice cracked. "They said you passed away." "I didn't." She blinked hard. "I didn't know." I tilted my head. "Did you ask?" She didn't answer. The music faltered. A staff member approached Nora with a hushed tone. Nora handed her another printed sheet. A moment later, the quartet stopped playing. All sound disappeared, except for the wind, tugging gently at the ribbons on the arbor. I turned to Brian. "You planned a wedding on my grave." His mouth moved, but no words came. Nora stepped forward. "This ceremony cannot proceed. The mortgage is in dispute. The property is in joint ownership, and the power of attorney is being investigated for forgery." A groomsman spoke up from the side. "What the hell is going on?" I answered without raising my voice. "I'm the groom's mother. My name is Marianne Colwood. I'm alive. And this is still my house." The silence was full, heavy. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Maggie looked at Brian. "Is it true?" He looked smaller somehow. Not young, not fragile, just small. I didn't think I thought she wouldn't. She shook her head. "You told me she was gone." He didn't speak. She turned to me, voice soft. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to ask, but now I can't unknow it." She set the bouquet on a side table. The stems bent under the weight. "I can't marry someone who erases people." And just like that, she walked back into the house. I didn't move. Neither did Brian. I turned to Nora. "We're done here." She nodded. "We'll file the next round on Monday." I walked out slowly, back the way I came. No one followed. No one called after me. The gravel crunched beneath my shoes like applause only I could hear. By the time I got back to the road, the sky had shifted. Less gray, more light. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel angry. I felt real. That was enough. The next morning, I didn't expect a call, and none came. No flowers, no apology, no explanation, just silence. But this time, it wasn't the kind that aches. It was the kind that settles, like when a storm passes and you realize nothing's broken, just rearranged. I spent that day doing small things, folding laundry, watering the herbs by my windowsill, making a pot of lentil soup. The world kept turning, and so did I. A week later, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a check, partial refund from the venue. Tucked behind it, a handwritten note on embossed stationery. Per dispute settlement and non-fulfillment of contract terms, remaining refund will be issued directly by counsel. Stonehouse Manor Events. Nothing from Brian. Not a word. I didn't expect one. The house was never sold. The mortgage application fell apart after the investigation. The forged documents were voided. The title remained split, still half mine. And that was enough. I didn't reclaim the house. I didn't want it anymore. Not as a home. It was a place with too many ghosts pretending not to know my name. Instead, I moved into a small apartment across town with wide windows and a sturdy kitchen table. The kind of place you grow into, not out of. Every Sunday, I went to the farmer's market. I bought sunflowers and peaches, sometimes a fresh loaf of bread I didn't need. I joined a book club with 3 other retired women who liked thrillers and hated predictable endings. We never talked about sons. One afternoon in October, while organizing my desk, I opened the folder still labeled oregano recipes. Inside, the flash drive was tucked into a zip pouch, along with printed copies of the affidavit, the wedding guest list, the letter from the bank. The paper had faded slightly around the edges, the ink still sharp. I added one last page, a photo of me standing outside the courthouse that day, coat open, face clear. I wasn't smiling. I didn't need to. I looked like someone who had made peace without making noise. I slipped the folder into a fireproof lockbox, closed the lid, and turned the key. Across the room, the kettle began to whistle. I stood, stretched, and made myself a cup of tea. I didn't think of Brian. I didn't think of Maggie. I didn't imagine who they told their version of the story to, because I knew the truth, and that was enough. Sometimes, when I passed by Stonehouse Manor on my way to the post office, I'd glance at it through the car window. It had new owners now, a couple in their 40s with a rescue greyhound and wind chimes on the porch. The arbor had been painted blue. The garden was blooming again. I never stopped. I never needed to. I had no interest in haunting old stories. I was writing a new one. Not the kind that begins with vengeance, but the kind that begins after everything else ends. And if you're still listening, still here with me at the end of this quiet storm, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been erased? Not forgotten, not overlooked. I mean truly erased. From the center of a story you helped build. If you have, drop a word below. A name, a city, a single moment that still presses against your chest. Because here's the truth. Sometimes all it takes to come back to life is showing up where they least expect you. And I did. I showed up. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I didn't even knock. I just walked in, alive. And that was enough. If this story sat with you, even quietly, I'd love to hear from you. What moment in your life made you feel invisible? And how did you rise from it? If you have, or when you do, leave a word, a sentence, or just still here. That's all it takes.